All right. Well, thank you very much, Vajracaksu, for that generous, kind introduction. Um, yeah, I'll start this talk with a story, um, a memory that actually took place in Turkey, and a little bit before that, before coming to Turkey in 2011. I did a summer volunteer camp in Finland, and as things happen when you're 21. There was a Polish girl there, and I won't share her name, but we had a summer romance. And afterwards, after the camp, I invited her to Belgium, and we got more involved with each other. And I knew that I was going to Turkey for an exchange year to study, and I didn't want to be in a relationship. I made that clear, and yet there was also something more going on that was significant between us. So when I was in Turkey, we were writing each other letters. Basically, you could say doing the things you do when you're in a relationship, or at least one of those things. Um, and at the same time, I did something basically that hurt her quite deeply, and she was really upset. And it was very strong for her, and she really told me what she felt and what she thought of me, and yeah, that wasn't easy to hear. It came a bit like a shock, actually, for me to hear that I had hurt her so badly, and it shook my image of myself quite strongly. And I felt a lot of remorse. I felt positive shame. I felt pain because I had pained her, and it just taught me something about myself, that previously I had been in a longer relationship, and there too I had hurt the other person, and so there was this strong determination to change that, and to not hurt to not hurt the people with whom I'm in a relationship anymore, and just to become more aware of that other person, of people in general, of my actions, of how they impact other people, this other person. Basically, I wanted to be a better man, though I didn't really know how to go about that, becoming a better man. Now, a few months after that, indeed, a friend invited me to a meditation course. It turned out to be a meditation course with this man with quite a funny name, I thought at that time, called Vajracaksu. Um, and well, I think this experience, this sort of how I hurt this person, um, it was quite a turning point for me in my life, actually. Of, like I said, wanting to become someone better, and it contributed to me becoming a Buddhist, actually, and now even an order member. And I think it has had a big impact on the rest of my life. So in that time, since that time, I've been in a few more relationships. I think it's fair to say that I'm a romantic soul. That I'm well, I sort of like being in a relationship, and if I wasn't in a relationship in that time, I was basically looking for one. So it's quite a strong area for me. And I think there's a sort of view that it will make me happy, sort of complete. Yeah, so in the last 4.5 years, I've lived in Padmaloka, in this community of 14 guys, all working in the retreat center. And at the same time, I've been in a long distance relationship with a Belgian woman who also live in a Triratna retreat center. And typically we would see each other 5 or 6 times per year. So not much. In the pandemic, even much less than that. And without a doubt, it's been the best relationship I've been in so far. It's been very loving. There has been very open communication. A lot of the time, I find it very satisfying. And it's also been really, really challenging and really hard often. And throughout that time, I've given a lot of thought to romantic relationships, and sort of asking myself questions like, well, as a Buddhist, should I be in a romantic relationship? What attitude can I bring to it that is helpful, or that is more helpful than the attitude I currently have? And how to make it work well, or better at least. And those are the three questions I'd like to answer today. And I need to acknowledge that, well, this is for the most part my own thinking from my own experience. It's influenced by quite a few people, among which Vajracaksu is one, mainly Buddhist friends, Buddhist sources. But probably if you'd ask the same questions to another Buddhist, even another Buddhist within Triratna, you'd probably get a different set of answers. So the title of this talk is Romantic Relationships, a Buddhist Perspective, rather than the Buddhist perspective. Just a disclaimer before we really start. Okay, so yeah, this first question, as a Buddhist, can we have a romantic relationship? So Gautama, before he was the Buddha, he left his family to be a wandering monk. He left behind wife and child, so he was celibate, as were the bhikkhus, the monks that formed the sangha with him. They left their wife or families, if they had one, to devote themselves entirely to the spiritual life, to basically to reaching enlightenment and to help others to do the same. So you could say there's an argument there that a Buddhist shouldn't have a romantic relationship. On the other hand, as you probably are aware, he gave us 5 precepts. The third precept goes like this: I undertake to abstain from sexual misconduct. So the precept doesn't tell us to abstain from any sexual activity. I think that's quite clear. It tells us to abstain from sexual misconduct. So my pragmatic conclusion out of this has been that he wasn't saying that everyone should be celibate, that people shouldn't have a romantic relationship. And so my own view around this is that, well, if you feel like you can live without a romantic relationship, I think that's a great thing, really. I think it gives you more time for practice, for formal Buddhist practice, and probably it will also just help you to put all your energies in practicing the Dharma more fully. You won't sort of try to fix your life through having a relationship. There can go a lot of energy in that, at least in my experience. But on the other hand, I think if you feel like you want a relationship, I think that's totally fine. But then let's try to bring that part of our life as much as we can onto the path, into our practice. And let's try to practice wholeheartedly within that context of a romantic relationship as well. So how can we do that then? Well, I think first of all, we need to sort of bring awareness to the fact that having a romantic relationship can be quite challenging. So, as I said, in the last 5 years, I've been in this romantic relationship. And honestly, it's been the context where I've experienced ongoingly, most regularly suffering. It's been my crucial situation, the sort of most challenging part of my life. It's been the area in which I've bumped up against myself again and again, where I've experienced my fears, my desires, my deepest patterns that cause me quite a lot of pain. So it's been challenging. It's been humiliating, sobering, humbling. And so why is that then? Why can relationships be that challenging then? Well, I think first of all, we need to acknowledge there's very strong forces involved, very strong energies involved in romantic relationships. There's a force of sexual desire, romantic feelings, and I think, well, people that seem very integrated, that seem quite solid, stable, they can be knocked off balance in a romantic relationship. And yeah, I think we can experience very strong, non-rational, even you could say unconscious emotions. So that's I think the first reason why it can be quite challenging. Secondly, well, romantic relationships in that context, we have the potential to hurt people very deeply. And the damage we can bring to other people can be really big. And obviously, the other way around goes as well. Other people, we can be hurt quite strongly in romantic relationships. We are at our most vulnerable in relationships. And at the same time, there's all these unconscious forces in play for both of us. So on the one hand, there's a chance that we will hurt the other person or that we will get hurt, but there's also quite a big chance that we will bring damage to ourselves. We can end up compromising ourselves to quite a strong damaging degree. We can do really weird things actually when we're in a romantic relationship, sort of out of a fear of losing a relationship, out of a need for approval. We can do things that when we look back on them, oh, that was a bit foolish to do. That wasn't very kind to myself actually. So if we are a Buddhist, we need to bring extra mindfulness to this whole area, and extra mindfulness also to our ethical behavior in this whole area. Now, to return to my own story, despite that it's often been really challenging ongoingly, I've kept at it, we've kept at it, and it's also been hugely rewarding. I've learned a huge amount about myself. I've got to know it myself in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise, probably. And like I said, it's been a painful process, but I've grown enormously through that process as well. I think it has helped me to become a happier, healthier, freer human being, somebody who's more aware of, well, I'm more aware of my own patterns. And I think I can say the same about my partner. I think she has grown as well through this relationship, and she's helped me to grow in this process, and I've helped her to grow, and that's been actually really beautiful and really satisfying to do that. So even though it's been challenging, in that challenge, there's been a lot of beauty and joy, and exactly because of the challenge, we've been growing. Um, and well, also just to be clear, it's not only been challenging; it's been a lot of the time very pleasant, very loving, very beautiful, delightful, rewarding as well. Um, yes. So I come to my second question now. What perspective or attitude can we bring to a relationship that is helpful for us? So this whole experience that I've told you a little bit about, it has urged me to see relationships differently, or at least try to see relationships differently, to try to bring a different perspective and attitude to it. So I think our usual attitude to relationships is well, can be summarized in the romantic myth. Um, the romantic myth is a very strong myth in our society. I think it's the main story in most movies, books. Is the myth that a lot of us base our lives upon. And this myth says basically find the perfect partner and live happily ever after. Sorry, find the perfect partner and live happily ever after. A bit like in the fairy tales. And it sort of says that I think it says that this other person will make you happy and bring you fulfillment. There's a sort of promise in that, isn't there? Now, in contrast to that, I propose that we approach relationships differently. I think the goal of being in relationships, or a more helpful attitude to that, is that it can help us grow. That a relationships can, in a relationships, we can get to know ourselves, our patterns, our limitations. It gives us a very concrete way, a concrete opportunity to work with them and to transform them. Basically, it gives us the opportunity to become a more loving, more generous, more contented person. And I think the relationship can be an arena, a working ground to encounter our wrong views, reaction patterns, limitations, and transform them. And at the same time, obviously, we are trying to help the other person to grow as well, to do the same thing. We're not trying to make them dependent of us. We're trying to help them to become freer, more of an individual, more of a happy, healthy human being. So, in short, the goal of a romantic relationship is to grow and to help the other person to grow as well. That's sort of my proposition. And yeah, maybe I'll try to translate that into an image, into two images. So I think we can say that the romantic myth, in that image, there's two people, and you and your partner, you're facing each other, and while doing that, everything sort of disappears around you. You only see each other, and you try to move closer and closer and closer and closer to one another. The image of a romantic relationship in a dharmic context is different. So there's you, your partner, and there's the Buddha. And you're both facing the Buddha, the ideal towards which you want to grow. And you're trying to move step by step towards the Buddha together. You're helping each other on quite a rocky, challenging, long path. And walking that path brings happiness rather than the person you're walking it with, although that might also bring you happiness. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of joy in growing into a happy, healthy human being. So two images, and don't take it literally. I'm for instance not saying that you both necessarily need to be a Buddhist. I don't think it's quite like that. What I'm trying to say is that I do think it works best if you're both trying to move beyond your current limitations, that you're both trying to grow in the relationship. Okay, so we've looked at should we have a romantic relationship, and what is the perspective we can bring to a romantic relationship that will help us. So I've said that we can see it as an arena, a working ground, in which we'll bump up against ourselves, but equally that will help us grow, and we can try also to help the other person grow. So how do we do that then? How do we work within that arena, within a romantic relationship, to grow and to help the other person grow? So to answer this question, I want to use the framework of the precepts. The precepts are probably the most general, widespread set of principles of how to live a good life, a beautiful life, a life driven by value for yourself, but also how to have the most positive effect on others and the world around us as much as possible. And the precepts, I'll talk mainly about them in positive form. Well, so they come in negative form, what we're trying to avoid, but in positive form, they are precepts, they are principles that we can embody more and more deeply. And I'm often very inspired by that, actually, because the sky is the limit, basically. There's no limit to how loving, how generous, how contented, how truthful, how mindful we can live our lives. And yeah, I found that very inspiring. There's infinite potential to be a more and more loving person, more and more loving partner, friend. There's an infinite potential to be a better and better support also for somebody else to grow by practicing the precepts. So what I'll do is I'll comment on each of the precepts to bring a perspective, maybe a practice that supports us to grow in the context of our relationship and to help the other person grow. And I think by trying to do that, there are also ways towards just a more positive, loving, and happier relationship. Sort of win-win, we could say. So the first precept is, with deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. And this precept is all about metta, about loving kindness. And yeah, I think in Buddhism, there's a very useful distinction for us between metta on the one hand and pema. And so metta is loving kindness, universal loving kindness, we can say. Pema, we can translate as attached love. It's typically what we feel towards our partner. So what does that mean exactly? What is this Pema thing exactly? So I'll talk personally. I love my partner. I really do. But if my partner would stop being interested in me, let's say she would break up with me, it's very likely that I will stop loving her in the same way as I do now. Um, there's an attachment to the fact that she loves me, that we have a relationship together, to the things that she gives me. And from that feeling, and you could even say actually that you could say there's a transactional element in that, to say it quite straightforwardly. I think that transactional element, you can say that out of that follows that I don't really see my partner in her full right. I see her in relationship to me, or actually, to say it more bluntly, I see her in terms of what she gives to me, or at least there's an element of how I see her that is that. I found this quote from Sangharakshita from Bhante very strong. I probably read it about 10 years ago. And I still quite remember quite well when I read it. Um, the quote said, or the quote says, by the couple, one means two people, usually of the opposite sex, who are neurotically dependent on each other, and whose relationship, therefore, is one of mutual exploitation and mutual addiction. A couple consists, in fact, of two half people, each of whom unconsciously invests part of his or her total being in the other person. Each is dependent on the other for the kind of psychological security that can be found ultimately only in oneself. So it's quite a strong quote. I was quite shook by that quote when I read it. And it describes an extreme of how we engage in relationships from the point of view of what the other gives us, from the point of view also of what neurotically we try to find in a relationship. And I also think we need to interpret the word "the couple" that he uses in this way. It's sort of bringing something to quite a strong end of the spectrum. But on the other hand, I think nevertheless, we can probably all recognize at least something of that quote in how we engage with relationships. So that's Pema, attached love. There's an element of attachment, of exchange, even of transaction. So then on the other hand, there is metta, loving kindness. And I think if we see somebody with metta, we see the person for who they are in their own right. We see the person as a growing human being, or at least a human being that has the potential to grow. And that potential is vast. There's a potential for becoming enlightened in that person. And I think the response that we have, if we are in metta, the response that we can have towards any person, but also towards our partner, is that we want them to do well for their own sake, not that so that he or she would be more loving to us, so that we can have a better relationship with them. No, we want them to be well, to grow, to thrive for themselves. And I think a good way to test or to gauge whether you are mostly in a Pema mode or in a metta mode towards the other person is asking yourselves a few questions. So let's say, first one, if the other person would not want to have sex anymore with me, would you still love them? Would you still want a romantic relationship with them? If the other person would decide to stop having a romantic relationship with you, would you still love them? And could you happily let that person go if that would help the other person to grow? So obviously these are really quite high, tall, or that's tall order. These are strong questions, but I think that's what we're aiming for as Buddhists. We're trying to move from Pema to Metta. And for that, we need to try to move away gradually from neurotic attachment to our partners. The less we depend on them for our happiness, the less we'll need from them. And the less we'll need from them, the better our relationship will be. And two, just very pithy, apart from those questions, very pithy tips to cultivate this point of view is, well, try dwelling on their qualities. Try dwelling on your partner's qualities, on sort of the aesthetic quality, the aesthetic beauty of the other person, not so much to what they bring you, but just how this person is, what strikes you in your partner that you find beautiful in that way. And secondly, and maybe some order members will disagree with this, but do the metta bhavana and don't be shy to put your partner in the metta bhavana. But try to dwell on those, well, let's call them aesthetic qualities rather than what your partner gives to you. Okay, so the second precept goes as follows: with open-handed generosity, I purify my body. And it follows on very well from what I've just said. Oh yeah, and I'll tell a little story, quite a personal story. Oh no, sorry, it's not. We're not there yet. It's just a story. In 2017, I had just started a romantic relationship. It was with somebody. It's not my current partner. It was with somebody who was a Buddhist in another tradition. I definitely already saw myself as a Buddhist as well. And I found myself going on a weekend retreat in Adistana, a retreat center also in the UK. And I had a connection with one of the leaders of the retreat. And we went for a walk, and I asked him, so, do you have any advice for a young Buddhist, somebody who's embarking on a new romantic relationship? And this man, he had been in a relationship for, I think, even several decades, actually, with his partner. And I think he still is. And he said that one of the main practices, the main questions in his relationships that he came back to again and again was asking himself, what can I give? What can I give rather than what can I get? And I think this question, what can I get? It's quite a strong question for us in the context of romantic relationships. I think it's very easy, normal, human that we bring expectations to our relationship, but they can make our relationship quite complicated. Um, Society and the romantic myth gives us this message that if only we find the right person and have a relationship with them, we'll be happy. And in that myth, there's it sort of implies that we can almost demand that from the other person, that this is almost our right, that whatever need, whatever expectation we have, the other person should fulfill it. Even that we have a right to sex, a right to affirmation, a right to intimacy, or at least maybe if we ask ourselves that rationally, we will say, no, 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 I don't have that. But probably sort of subconsciously, we actually bring that to a romantic relationship, I think, or at least I do. And expecting is painful. Essentially, expecting is craving. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha tells us quite firmly that the root of all suffering is craving. And I think if we reflect on our experience, we'll recognize that. Expecting is like a closed fist. It's like it's grabbing something, even by force sometimes. And it closes down our being as well. It's not only that we're trying to grab something, it's like our whole being closes and becomes tense. And it's painful. And if we don't get what we want, that craving turns into well, we get angry, basically. We get angry. So the antidote to expectations is giving, is asking ourselves a question again and again, what can I give? And when we give, that closed fist opens into a gesture of giving. Our being, while doing that, our being opens, and there's a wholesome pleasure in giving. I remember I was quite new to the Dharma, and an order member gave a talk, and she told us that what she would do when she would feel down, when she wouldn't feel well, and she said, "Well, I give a gift." And I thought, yeah, of course, you give a gift to yourself. You go and buy a cake for yourself, or buy something you've always wanted. But actually, what she meant was I give a gift to somebody else. And I was a bit puzzled by that actually, and but I tried it out, and I think she's right. Giving a gift, giving whatever actually is uplifting. There's pleasure in giving, and um, so yeah, I think there's pleasure in giving. There's pleasure also giving to our partner, and especially giving with an open hand, with open-handed generosity. The precept says, in giving without expectations. Now, in a relationship, there's many ways that we can give. Actually, Vajracaksu put me onto this. I think it's sort of our default to give what we want ourselves, because that's what we understand. So we give what we want ourselves. For me, personally, that's physical touch or words, loving words, words of affirmation. But actually, giving is an art. Different people have different love languages, different ways in which they understand, in which they receive love. Very shortly, there's 5 of them, 5 love languages, and it's worth finding out which one you respond to and which one your partner responds to. So the first one is words of affirmation, saying "I love you" or "You look good today." The second one is physical touch. Can be as simple as a hug, as holding a hand. Can be making love. It can be a kiss. The third one is acts of service. For instance, doing the washing up for your partner, picking your partner up when he or she needs it. That. A fourth one is spending time together, spending quality time together. And then fifthly, there's giving gifts of all kinds. So I ran through that, but we don't have time to go into that entirely. That could be a talk in itself. But yeah, to conclude this precept, I think in a relationship we have a choice. Do we want to create a climate of expectations, wanting things from the other person and being disappointed when we don't get that? I think this attitude, it can bring us in a sort of a deadlock of mutual resentment for not getting what we want. Maybe even a trench war where we only give something to the other person when he or she gives us something first, and you get stuck in that attitude. The alternative option is trying to create a climate of free-flowing giving, a spiral of giving, of love, where the natural response to our giving is that the other person will want to return that giving, and that creates a climate of abundance. So if you feel a bit stuck in your relationship, a bit closed off, a bit needy perhaps, take a risk and give something to your partner without expecting something back. Okay, so we've seen the first precept, metta versus pema, the second precept, expectation versus giving. The third precept goes as follows: with stillness, simplicity, and contentment, I purify my body. Yeah, and here I do want to speak quite personally. So in the last year, I've actually had a lot of difficult emotions coming up in the context of my relationship. Last November, my partner and I, we went on a holiday, and before that, I had had a pretty demanding period, a period in which I was stretching myself a bit too much, and I wasn't in a great place. And basically, looking back on it, what I wanted was a romantic holiday, just relaxing and loving, and I came with expectations to that. And my partner wasn't really fulfilling those expectations. And I felt I was really triggered in insecurity. And I got into a pattern of needing affirmation from her, asking it from her, even demanding it from her, even taking it from her. And the more I asked, the more I was pulling, the more difficult it became for her to give that to me. And looking back, it was, well, I think it was quite off-putting for her. The more I demanded, the less I think it was attractive for her to give that. So I got into a pretty dark place during that holiday, a place of lack, of not enough. It felt Well, it sort of felt like I had a hole in my heart, a hole of insecurity, a hole with views that I'm unlovable, that I have to earn love, that I'm actually not good enough to deserve that. And once that hole had opened, it was as if nothing could really fill that anymore. It was a bottomless hole, and um, sort of actually in that time, it was as if I wanted to be my girlfriend, to be my mother, to give me unconditional love, um, and in that sort of sex was like an existential act of affirmation that I wanted. And even if she would have given me all of that, um, it wouldn't have filled that hole in my heart. It was sort of quite bottomless. And it took me quite a while to get out of that hole. For about 5 weeks, I had these surges of strong emotions of insecurity, fear, neediness. It was a very painful time actually. And yeah, my partner, she responded, I think, well, in a very loving way. She didn't want to play my game, and I think that was right for her to do that, to not do that. And but she kept on witnessing what I was going through in a very loving way and supporting me, encouraging me, being present. Yeah, yeah, I feel a bit emotional now. Um, so yeah, does anybody recognize such feelings of neediness, of lack, of not enough? See a few nods. I'm sharing this because I think there is indeed something quite, yeah, universal in it. It's I think the area of romantic relationships in life, it can be a really strong context for discontentment. The area of sex, romantic relationships, and if we don't have a relationship, we want one, and if we do have one, we might not feel it's quite good enough. There's always something more that we want. And yeah, I've said it a few times now. I think our culture, and Vajracaksu in his introduction also touched upon that, our culture overloads the romantic relationship. Bante writes about this. Um, we come to expect from our sexual partner far more than he or she is able to give. If we are not careful, we expect him or her to be everything for us: sexual partner, friend, companion, mother, father, advisor, counselor, source of security, everything. We expect this relationship to give us love, security, happiness, fulfillment, and the rest. We expect it to give meaning to our lives, and in this way, it becomes like an electric cable carrying a current that is too much for it. The result is that the poor, unfortunate sexual relationship very often blows a fuse. It breaks down under the strain. So yeah, I find that a very strong and recognizable quote, and it's almost unfair to expect this from our relationship and from our partner. Um, and I think what it comes down to is that there's something we look for in romantic relationships that we can only really give ourselves. Basically, we're looking for self-meta, sort of self-affirmation, and the only person who can really give that is ourselves. And we lack something in our lives, and we expect that other person to give it to us. But I think there's ways in which we can try to cultivate that ourselves. We can try to cultivate this sense of contentment in ourselves. And I think that contentment, that can be a wonderful quality to cultivate as well. It's cultivating our inner resources, and inner momentum to not depend on food, on sex, on other people to be happy, to be fulfilled. And I think maybe, well, actually, I didn't think of this beforehand, but when I met Vajracaksu, I saw somebody who was really happy and fulfilled, and I found that very attractive. Actually, it's a radiant quality, and it means that you're able to appreciate what you have. You need less and less, and it's based on appreciation and enjoyment in our lives. So how do we do that then? I think we need to cultivate a rich life, and life in which our relationship is almost like a nice to have, and it's probably a really, really nice to have. But we can do without it as well. It's a life in which it's only one of many things that brings us a sense of abundance, of meaning, of connection, of value in our life. So how do we do this then? So I've got 4, again, quite pithy ways in which we can cultivate this. So first way to do this is through friendship, and especially through spiritual friendship. Friendship with people who have the same values, who are on the same path, people who want to grow and who want to help others grow as well. And I found there's often something when we communicate with such friends that is invigorating. There's electricity in the air. And it helps us to get to know ourselves better, and it helps us to grow. And at the same time, that happens for the other person as well. So that's the first way. A second way, I think, is spending time in nature and spending time enjoying or even creating beauty and art. And these are very wholesome pleasures. They're pleasures that we don't get addicted to. They're pleasures that aren't like a mosquito bite. A mosquito bite, like let's say a mosquito bite, it itches, you scratch, and as soon as you've stopped scratching, it itches more and you want to scratch again. And there's a lot of pleasures in our life that we look for that are like that, like checking, I don't know, our phone, things like that. But there's also wholesome pleasures like art, like nature. A third way is doing the metta bhavana, is actually Buddhist practice or just spiritual practice in general. But I think the metta bhavana is a particularly strong way in which we can do that. And it opens our being more and more. It develops, the metta bhavana specifically develops a positive attitude to ourselves and to others. And meditation by meditation, we may be able to slowly fill that hole in our heart. And fourthly, gratitude. That has been a very strong practice for me. From that time in November onwards, I've been basically most evenings when I lie in bed, I reflect on what I'm grateful for that day. I go through my day and I think, oh yeah, that was actually really beautiful, and that's a beautiful area in my life as well. And this person does that, and I'm grateful for that. And it very often fills me with joy and makes me feel rich in my life. Yeah. Okay. So then there's a 4th precept. With truthful communication, I purify my speech. I think the main thing I want to talk about in this under this heading is trust. I think trust is a major condition for a relationship to work. And a first way in which to cultivate trust is truthfulness and authenticity. I think it's very crucial that we share ourselves as fully as we can with our partner. We need to share our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts openly, completely honestly, even with each other. And for me, the fact that I can do that with my partner is a great source of pleasure for me. And I think even that it is essential to our well-being that we can do that with others, with our partner. It can be like a balm for our soul, I think. And it's very easy for a relationship to remain on a certain level. You're sort of both being nice to each other. You're doing nice things together. You talk about nice things. You have a nice time, hopefully. But actually being nice is not always being kind or being truthful. There can be a shallowness to that. And especially when there's something that bothers you about something your partner has done, has said, that may prevent you from giving yourself more fully to the relationship, from opening up more and more fully to the other person. And I think a relationship can remain quite shallow because of that. So for me personally, I've really learned that it's crucial for relationships that you take a risk, that you take risks in your communication, and you address those areas where you feel a bit blocked, where you feel uneasy about, that you talk about what bothers you, that you talk about feelings towards the other person that actually you don't want to disclose because that might upset the other person. But actually, very often, if you don't feel like you want to share something, you probably have to do it. You have to do it to go deeper, to move closer to the other person. This may also include patterns that you feel ashamed about, that you feel that you think your partner will dislike you for doing that or having that. And I think if you do that with kindness, if you share those things with kindness, and if the other person responds with kindness and a willingness to engage, you are bound to go deeper with each other. And I've had many times where I know I need to communicate something a bit tricky with my partner. And I feel nervous. I can often feel very nervous when I know I have to do that. But then if I do that in a way in which I take responsibilities for my own stuff, it's almost inevitable that something opens up between us, and afterwards we actually both feel invigorated by that communication and closer to one another. And actually, having arguments, having a row, can be very good in that way. Something is happening, one person is reacting, or maybe you're both reacting, and then if you can take a step back, if you can stop and take a step back and look what is actually going on, you can talk openly about it. I think you're just going to go deeper with each other and feel closer with each other, and you're sort of, yeah, you can work from a different level again next time as well. Now, another crucial condition for trust is to take responsibility for our own actions, for our own actions. So maybe you, like in the example, in the very first example I gave, with which I started the talk, where I heard this other person, there was this clear feeling of shame, of positive shame, that urged me to do something differently. And probably we've all experienced this in our own way, something we feel uneasy about, something we feel ashamed about. And that as well, you may feel that that is coming in between you and your partner, that it damages the trust between you, that it damages your integrity, and that blocks you actually from open communication. I think it's really important to address those things, to acknowledge your mistakes, and to apologize. It can go something like this. I spoke harshly to you yesterday, and I want to apologize for that. It came out of a reaction to you doing this or doing that. And I reacted because deep down, I'm afraid that you don't take our relationship seriously. And I know that it's rationally that's absurd, but there's this little boy in me that is afraid that you'll just leave me behind. So I apologize. And next time, I just want to pause and take a moment and be by myself and be with that reaction rather than playing it out to you. So it could be something like this. The flip side of this is that when your partner acknowledges something like that to you and apologizes, that we need to be able to forgive, that we need to be able to let go of resentment, because that we need to be able to start with a clean slate. Okay, I come to the fifth precept. The fifth precept goes like this: with mindfulness clear and radiant, I purify my mind. So I want to talk about something quite specific here. Traditionally, there are the four foundations of mindfulness. One of them is being mindful of dharmas, or I think Bante has translated this as well as being mindful of reality. And is this area I want to look a bit more closer at. So as I've mentioned, relationships are an arena to learn how to work with our selfishness, and at the root of our selfishness, there's wrong views. Basically, well, the basic wrong view is that there's me and there's the rest of the world. Yeah, but there's many more ways in which we are deluded. There's many more wrong views that we have, and the lakshanas, they're a traditional list of 3 marks of reality that counter 3 of those core wrong views. And I found them actually very useful to work with my own reactions. I will only go into 2 of them. We don't have time to go into all 3 of them. Yeah. So the first one is dukkha. The first lakshana is dukkha, and this counters the wrong view that, yeah, this expectation that the other person will make us happy or should make us happy, and the expectation that that all brings. But we need to realize that the other person can never live up to all these expectations. And this perspective of this lakshana of dukkha, dukkha means suffering, it's the universal, dukkha says, is the universal truth that nothing is 100% satisfactory. It means that everything, however pleasant it is, will also involve suffering, and that nothing will ever go 100% as you want it to go. And recently I was on a retreat where we studied the Bodhicharya Avatara. It's the text out of which our puja comes. And there's this quote that I found really striking, really strong. Life breaks its promise. Life breaks its promise. So, for example, recently, me and my partner, we celebrated our 5 years together, and we had planned to go have dinner together, go out to have dinner, and basically to celebrate, to mark that point. And I was really looking forward to that. And but she wasn't feeling well, and basically our conversation didn't go really anywhere in the restaurant. It was also a bit the setting of the restaurant that was responsible for that. And I felt disappointed and sad, and again, sort of going a bit into this feeling of lack. And in such a case, I can find it really helpful to reflect, this isn't just happening to me. This isn't the world working against me. This is universal. Nothing can be entirely satisfactory. This relationship isn't entirely satisfactory. She isn't entirely satisfactory. She cannot give me full satisfaction. Such is life. Such is reality. I can't blame her for this. I can't blame anyone for this. This is just what reality is like. So the second wrong view that we have is that we think that things are permanent. So this is my 5th romantic relationship, more serious romantic relationship. So I've had 4 relationships before, and they've all ended, obviously. And despite knowing this rationally, I see myself doing the same things as I've done with those previous relationships. On a deep emotional level, I believe I want this relationship to last forever. But I can find it really difficult when there's this chance that the relationship might end. There's a challenge coming up between us, and then this feeling of fear arises, and it's as if a part of myself is about to die, thinking about the relationship that will end. Now, in his last words, the Buddha said, "Everything is impermanent. With mindfulness, strive on." Everything is impermanent. This talk will end in a few minutes. The computer through which I'm giving this talk will fail at some point in time. This planet will at some point disappear, as will the sun. Everything is impermanent. And so is this relationship. There's a few options. You will end the relationship, your partner will end the relationship, or you'll decide to end it together, or you will die, your partner will die, or you will both die at the same time. So in any of those cases, your relationship will end. And I find that contemplating that fact results in a sense of freedom. Something like, okay, this relationship will end, so I don't have to base my whole life on it, my sense of self on it, because it is impermanent and it will end. And if it will end rather soon, in a way, that would be a shame, but it's okay because it would end anyway. So there we go. 2 lakshanas, 2 perspectives that we can bring to our relationship, to our reactions, to our emotions. They're universal truths that we can apply. And I've applied them in 2 ways. On the one hand, you can reflect on them when you're having a difficult time. I find that it takes this feeling away that, oh, I'm a victim of maybe the other person. The world is against me. No, this is just happening to everyone. It's universal. On the other hand, you can also reflect on them proactively. And more days than, well, most days I reflect on them in the context of my relationship, because there's a lot of attachment for me there. So I try to sort of actively break down those wrong views that I have about them, to decrease my attachment to my relationship and to my partner. All right. So we've come to the end of this talk on romantic relationships. We've asked ourselves a number of questions. Should a Buddhist have a romantic relationship? That was the first one. What perspective can we bring to a romantic relationship, and how to practice within a romantic relationship? And I stated that relationships, you can see them as an arena to meet your strongest tendencies, to face things that are holding us back. It may have, yeah. And we've looked at these 5 great principles, the 5 great precepts that the Buddha gave us to work with those tendencies and to become more loving, more generous, more contented, more truthful, and more mindful. And as I said, the sky is the limit. There's no ceiling to how we can embody those principles. So yeah, I hope that if you have one, I hope that you'll enjoy your relationship, that you'll also be able to meet those challenges when they come up, and to grow through them, to work on yourself through them. And I hope as well that you're able to help your partner to grow and do the same. And I hope that you'll enjoy that process.